catching a feeling.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Feels Out Loud, brought to you by Becoming Together Therapy and Wellness. This is your host, Becky McNattin, along with my guest host today, Robin Melville. We are glad to have you listening as we live and share stories of mental health. And it's really exciting to have you on the show, Robin.
Thank you. I am excited to be here.
I'm so glad you could be here today. So today I want to start by asking a few questions to our listeners. And Robin, feel free to chime in too.
All right.
Are you mean to you? Do you have an inner critic?
Yes.
Robin says yes. When was the last time you judged yourself harshly? Maybe you said something like the following. Why are you wearing that? What kind of smile was that in the picture you just took? Seriously? What made you ask that question at the meeting? People hated it. You're never going to meet someone. Why do you ask for help like that? You're such a burden. Said anything like this?
Yeah, just this morning. So
Okay. What kinds of things do you all, as listeners, find yourself saying to you? According to a 2005 National Science Foundation article, the average person, get this, Robin, has 12,000 to 60,000 thoughts per day. Per day. About 95% of our thoughts are repetitive, and 75 to 80% are negative. Wow. 95% of our thoughts are repetitive, and 75 to 80% are negative. And I just repeated that.
Well, now I'm like, we only have 5% of new thoughts every day.
Oh, my goodness. My first thought on this is that our brains, me included, everybody, we are never stopping.
No.
We are never giving ourselves space to slow down. And we keep processing the same stuff. My second thought on this is, oh, wow, we are spinning in not so nice things to think about. 75 to 80% is negative. With this amount of negativity, even as I'm sitting here right now, I find myself wondering how much of this negative thought, 75 to 80%, is focused inward at us. Someone said to me recently, Becky, if I talked to other people like I talk to myself, I'd get punched in the face. And I totally agreed with this. I don't even like to acknowledge out loud what I say to me on a frequent basis. And me and this person had a great conversation about self-talk we have all day long, and how we don't even necessarily come to the conclusions that we'd like to about the stuff we think, which is so interesting. And we wondered together about the function of being so judgy with us, and I shared with them that self-critical folks tend to be people who hate failing. Me too, everybody. They tend to try to avoid rejection and feel guilt easily. Robin, do you fall into this category?
No, I love failure.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I resonate with that for sure.
And have you always noticed this about you?
Oh, yeah. Very competitive. You can ask anyone that tries to play a game with me.
Okay.
So, yeah, I think it's not necessarily a nice place inside my head if I'm losing.
Okay.
Something.
Okay. And then you'll start to, so your inner critic says things about needing to win.
Yes. Oh,
okay.
Yeah.
And
or just be better in general at anything.
Okay. And it's often such a private conversation with just us, like in our minds. And what do you make of that?
I mean, it's when you said you wouldn't want to say out loud all the things you say to yourself, I took a moment of like, oh, I've never considered that, but I definitely don't think I'd want someone else to hear it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like it being, private.
Right.
You can say anything.
Maybe because we wonder what other people would think about what we talk about to ourselves.
Yeah, or even like, hear them say, wow, that's really harsh.
Yes. Great discussion. Love this. Are you listening and wonder, why are we all so self-critical? Right now, we're going to take a short commercial break, but stay tuned for 5 reasons why we use self-criticism and 5 ways you can change your thinking. Thank you, everyone, for listening to Feels Out Loud.
From nobody else, all you got to do now. Nothing to lose. In a world full of strangers, you don't know who to trust. All you see is danger, trying to find what you lost. You can't go it alone.
Welcome back to
Everybody
Feels Out Loud, brought to you by Becoming Together Therapy and Wellness. I am Becky McNattin, along with Robin Melville today. Let's dive right back into what's behind all this self-criticality. Did you know, Robin, that there is science behind our self-talk? Sure you did.
I believe it.
When we focus on judging ourselves, we activate parts of our brain associated with that fight-flight response. And when we engage in self-criticism, we actually are creating pathways in our brain. The more that we repeat critical statements, the stronger these pathways become. And you guessed it, the quicker we use them every time. Which is awesome the way our brains work, and also really sad.
Yeah.
And it makes me think about, so why are we so self-critical? What's the function of it? And I've been thinking in the last couple of weeks, the role that it plays in my life. And so I developed 5 big reasons. There's probably more, but 5 big reasons that we use self-criticality. And I want to go through them. I'm going to call them the 5 Ps, Robin.
All right.
Portrayal, perfection, perception, punishment, and protection. And I'll say those again. Portrayal, perfection, perception, punishment, and protection. And I want to take time to go through each of these in depth. So the first big reason that we use self-criticality is that it was modeled for us. It's portrayal. So think about how it was portrayed to you. Think of who the people were around you growing up. Who are those people? Not just your caregivers, any adult. What did they show you about judging self? What kinds of things did you watch or hear them say about themselves, or maybe what they said about you? Maybe your caregiver said things to themselves like, oh my gosh, that was a stupid thing to do. Maybe you had someone call you names as a kid. And so it wouldn't be a huge leap if we feel or witness external criticality to then internalize this. So what kinds of things do you think caregivers model to kids, Robin? Or adults in general model to kids?
Yeah, I think, just with body image, I think is a huge one for this.
Yeah,
I know
judgment of body image.
Right,
or-
like that's been a hot topic of like, how do we learn to view ourselves? And we hear, self-criticism from the adults around us when we're kids. It's probably pretty common that you hear an adult around you talk about, I'm too short, I'm too, all of the things we say about our looks, I think is a huge one that we don't even realize is going on.
Sure.
And that, sticks with kids, like you said, kids absorb that as a way of being.
Mm-hmm. And we absorbed that as we were kids.
Right.
In the adults that were portraying that to us. Maybe that fixation on appearance or asking questions even to other people around them. Like, what does this look like?
Right. And other kids too. It's like once they start to realize, oh, this looks good, this is cool, you start to form those ideas of, I don't have those really cool shoes. And they, like other kids, like them. So I must not be cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the saying things out loud and assessing what was, or evaluating what our statements just were. As I said in the first segment, that was such a stupid thing to say. Or that adults, we say those things without really thinking about them.
Yeah. I, a lot of times, will hear it from clients and say, okay, I'm going to call you out when I hear a self-deprecating comment. Because it's just so natural. And I'm guilty of it myself. And so my husband and I will try to call each other out and be like, hey, that was something that wasn't nice to yourself. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people, I think we all do it just so naturally and so automatically that we don't even realize how often it's happening.
Yeah. Along that, do you think that adults are aware of what we model to kids, or that adults who model to us, are they aware of that self-criticality?
My experience and thoughts about it, I would say no. I mean, if it's automatic to us and we're not aware of it for ourselves, think of how easy it is to, you have a million things going on. You've got to get the kids food. You've got to help with homework, all of this stuff. It's going to be really challenging to also be aware of everything you're saying and doing about yourself.
Of that critical dialogue.
Right. So it's just kind of, it's going to happen, and it's hard to avoid.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I was thinking about in terms of portrayal is how kids watch adults talking to other adults, and how often adults are talking critically about other adults.
Oh, yeah.
And the bearing witness to either the talking about other adults or, and I want to ask you about both of these, or the avoidance of taking emotional and personal risks. And the internalization that kids have on criticality of not doing something. So either what's said out loud or what's not said out loud, and what are we not doing because we might be critical of ourselves. What would you say about either of those?
Oh, yeah. The said out loud one, I'm thinking of when, mom and dad are talking about their day at work. Imagine all of the things they might be saying about frustrations with coworkers or difficulty in traffic. All the things that we adults generally talk about in the evening. How much of that is criticizing others? And then the kids hear that and think like, oh, wow, there's a lot of things people can do wrong.
People can do wrong.
There's a lot of things that I could be criticized for.
Yeah.
And the kids may not necessarily consciously think that, but they absorb it as this is what people do that's wrong. I can't do that.
And so recognition that our own critical voice as adults comes from, it was modeled for us. It was portrayed to us, whether or not people knew it. And as you said, people probably aren't super aware of it because
it's natural.
It's repetitive and it's natural. But it did come from where it was portrayed.
And touching on the what's not said, too, is that could be huge to kids, too. I think a lot of us are afraid to say, oh, I look great today, or, oh, I did a great job on this. Adults don't necessarily, say the positive things about themselves. And to kids, when that's not said, it's kind of taught, don't say that.
Don't say it. Excellent point. The second reason that I'm going to say we use self-criticality is perfection. So we had portrayal, and now we have perfection. We try to motivate to action or tasks by using negativity and can fall into the patterns of connecting our internal drive to being hard on ourselves. Almost like we will keep moving forward if we point out how bad we are. Think of how often you highlight to yourself what could be better, so you try again. How many times have you said to yourself, Robin, well, that went okay, but it could have been way better?
How many times today? Or
this morning? Isn't it interesting?
Yeah, that is that. I mean, and that one, the interesting thing about it, I don't know if I would have necessarily picked up that is self-criticism, right? It's like, it doesn't sound like a critique, but the thought is, yes, I did not do this well enough.
And definitely, one way to look at this is it could be rooted in the concept of striving, which is awesome, and goal setting.
Motivating.
We want to make things better, more efficient. Those of us who tend to be in the innovation bucket, if you're listening and you are in that, what else could be in this world, definitely can be rooted in that. But the cost, it seems like, is I'm never good enough. Mm-hmm. What would you say about that?
I think that's a huge piece, is those of us that do like to think about the potential or the what could be, dreamers. That's great. And I'm a dreamer. Love,
yes,
just ideating and thinking about this is where we are. Where could we go? Which is a huge strength. And like you said, that also can lead to always looking at what could be better. The grass is greener. What do I need to do differently?
Yeah, right.
It's forgetting to acknowledge where we are currently and how this is probably some point that we wanted, it in our past.
Yes.
We wanted to get here. And when we do, we're just looking forward to the next thing.
So I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here, but thinking about pointing out what went wrong, has that ever helped? Do you have an example in your world of, I pointed out what went wrong, and I really was truly motivated?
Let me think about this.
Your pause tells me that
this one's tough.
Your pause tells me that that maybe we get ourselves thinking that it is motivating.
Yeah.
But it actually is guilt creating. It is shame creating.
Yeah.
That perhaps we have motivation from, well, I don't want to fail, as we mentioned in the first segment, but it isn't necessarily helpful.
Right. And I do, as you were just saying that, I realized like it can also create anxiety for when you do it the next time because it adds pressure.
Yeah.
So I've identified what I did wrong. Mm-hmm. And I think, oh, that'll help me avoid it next time. But really that just puts it more in our head. So next time we're thinking about those things and then there's an added pressure and anxiety.
Yeah. And for those who utilize perfectionism or perfection, frequently the bar is never there. So that is inherently we are not enough because we reset the bar in whatever it wasn't, which, like I said, could be rooted in striving. And also there is a cost to us. The third P in my 5 Ps of self-criticality is perception. Us humans celebrate humility all the time. We love it. We value it deeply. Me too. And we can use self-criticality to try and stay humble. We get ourselves thinking that positive self-statements come across as arrogant. And you mentioned this just a couple minutes ago, Robin. We worry that if we say good things about ourselves, we will stop being humble and maybe other people won't see us positively. In this line of thinking, we see being kind to us as selfish. And I hear all the time as a therapist, Becky, I don't want to seem selfish, but I need blank from other people. And the worry there is that having a need will make us appear a certain way to others. Maybe we will come across as entitled, or maybe we're going to be not a team player, or we're self-involved. What do you think about that, Robin?
Yeah, I think one, complimenting yourself, I wish was more acceptable. I love when I hear other people doing it. And my first thought is, I wish I could be that confident to feel, they're celebrating themselves. Mm-hmm. And that is inspiring. And I think, like you said, a lot of times we look at having needs as selfish.
We do.
And I talk about this a lot with clients too. It's like, I didn't want to be selfish, so I sacrificed my own needs. Mm-hmm. And I've started to pose the question of what makes yours less important than theirs. Mm-hmm. If we don't, it's not putting ourselves ahead of anyone else, but on an equal plane, right? Like we're putting everyone above ourselves and thinking if we even just put us on the same level, that's selfish and
right.
Can cause a lot of harm to ourselves.
Particularly if it's rooted in or stemming from how am I perceived by other people? What's going to be the perception of other people in me putting my need first or prioritizing it? It doesn't even have to be first.
Yeah.
And it can start with lovely intentions because that idea of humility, we want to stay grounded in our skills and talents. Of course we do. But it can cause us to never be satisfied or start looking to what others might think of us. And so we can also be critical with ourselves and try to adapt what we think others want us to be, maybe even getting hyperfixated on what do they think of me? What do they think of me? What do they think of me? What would you say?
Yeah, I think that's a trap. That's a big trap that I think most of us fall into when we're teenagers, absolutely. And it's hard to climb out of that because a lot of life can revolve around, like job interviews. What do they think of me? Of course, that's important. Having a community, having connection with others. It does matter how you interact with them, but letting them define you is where the line is kind of crossed. Like you got to find that balance of, I want to make sure that, I'm interacting in a way that feels right for me and them, but I'm not losing myself in that. Mm-hmm. Like I get to show up here too. So what do they think of me and what do I think of myself?
And you said not losing myself, maybe also not defining myself.
Yeah. Or not giving up that power to define you.
Yeah. That of course, adaptation is amazing. It's a beautiful, we talked about that last week in adapting to moments in what might be calling us in terms of job transition. So adaptation is fantastic. And if it's at the cost of us.
Right.
What you're bringing up.
Yeah. Like where's that line of how much of this is flexibility and how much of this is sacrifice?
Is sacrifice, yeah. And how much of it is rooted in fear? Because that idea of perception may not be that we really believe that about ourselves, but we think other people want to see this, that in us.
Yeah.
That thinking through what people might think about us and overthinking about that leads to the fourth P in my list of self-criticality. That's punishment. We get ourselves believing that being self-critical can be accountability or learning for what we have done. Maybe mistakes we have made, almost like if we keep thinking about it, we can undo it, even if we know we can't. This is classic rumination that we all do. We keep thinking and thinking and thinking, trying to come up with how we can redo, maybe rationalize a moment. And I have to tell this story about, I have a very vivid memory of, this was a lot of years ago, everyone, when I was learning to drive. I completely cut off a driver in another car. I was in the car with my dad. He's in the passenger seat, and I was turning into a lane on the highway. I had a yield sign, and I literally did not pay any attention to the sign whatsoever. I very likely terrified my dad, who isn't right next to me. And I went on my merry way, just merging in, total lack of attention to the person in the lane who definitely did have the right of way. They laid on the horn, as they absolutely should have. They for sure should have. And my dad told me to brake quite loudly. And the person flicked me off, and I could tell was swearing at me. It was a big mistake, and honestly, I was lucky. We were both moving slow, but I didn't hit the car. I probably was just lucky that they were quick and amazingly thinking in their driving skills. But all was fine, and the moment passed. Although, I immediately went to a shame place that I didn't even realize. I kept thinking and thinking about that moment, and I don't really even know why I was doing it. But it's as if I was looking for a way to make my mistake okay and just kept needing to replay it to tell myself how bad I was. Nobody around me judged me. After that initial moment of the other driver being upset, nobody said anything. But as you can see, even right now, I remember it to this day, and this was like decades ago. And I do this all the time. You mentioned in teenagedom, we kind of, from that perception space, or I gave an example of why did you say that question at the staff meeting or the meeting. Yeah. That we think about the moments that have already occurred. And I was just talking with someone a few days ago about the function of thinking through moments we can't change. Why do we do that? My hypothesis is we're seeking to punish ourselves and think about it until we can rationalize it. We're trying to teach ourselves something when really we're just reliving moments that made us feel bad.
Yeah.
What would you say?
Well, one, we're perpetuating that bad feeling that we had initially.
Yes, we are.
I've been thinking about this too, and I think it comes from a place of fear of it happening again. For some reason, we have this idea of like, I'm going to replay it to identify like where I went wrong or where the mistake happened, or just kind of like sports teams look at the games from the past week to find out like what should we do better next week.
Yeah,
and it's like, if they made a mistake, they probably don't feel great rewatching that over and over and over.
Yeah.
But there's this idea of if I analyze it excessively, I can make changes so that it doesn't happen again.
It leads to that last thing that we were talking about, or second one in terms of perfection, that if perhaps we think we can come up with a new outcome next time, or as you said, we can have it not happen. Do you think it's successful?
It hasn't been for me. So no matter how many times I put my foot in my mouth, I can always find a way to do that again. So.
Yeah. Well, it leads me to the last point of a reason for how we use self-criticality. It's a great transition into that one. I call it protection, and this really is judge or be judged. That the overthinking, we hold the framework that if we are mean to us, we will ward off feelings that we would have from other people's comments. The idea is that maybe we keep ourselves from feeling pain of other people saying things, so we want to try and get ahead of what other people might be thinking or what they might say, so we can either fix what's wrong or insulate ourselves from negative comments. And I love this so much. It makes me chuckle because it's like, hey, everybody, I can get out of a feeling. I will avoid being hurt. And even though it doesn't work at all. So we create scenarios of all the things that people might not like about what we do. You mentioned even rewatching tapes. And we certainly rewatch tapes in our own brains. We think through what could go wrong. We could see as not being good. Maybe we are looking at areas of improvement, what any negative voice might say, all before anyone has an ability to say it to us. Pretty solid. Only it doesn't work whatsoever because not only does it not insulate from being hurt when other people still say the critical things that might come up, we spend significant time swimming in the concepts of us making mistakes, having bad ideas, just negative content in general, 75 to 80%, as I said. And we almost always still get the scenarios inaccurate. Robin, do you have a story about this?
Thinking about it, and let's see. I think something that came to mind as you were talking about the idea of protection is like, I'm going to put myself so far down that when someone else does it, I'm already there.
Yes.
Like it's not going to get to me.
Yep.
Actually, so this week even, I've had a client say, I need to prepare myself, almost like building a what's it called? The shield of armor. Like kind of I'm going to build this wall around me so that I can go into battle.
Yeah.
And it's funny that you mentioned, like, we think that's avoiding getting hurt. We think that's protecting us. It may be avoiding hurt from external sources. It's not avoiding hurt.
And often, if somebody still said it to us, we still feel hurt.
Oh, yeah.
We're just hurting ourselves repeatedly beforehand.
Right.
It makes me think about even me in this radio show. When I started thinking about the whole idea of this, I let myself dream, which was really cool. And I thought up all these different topics we could discuss and how incredible it would be to bring mental health and wellness to the radio waves. And then my inner critic started to think through the need to think through all the potential negative feedback that would come. I created these scenarios about what people might say, what people might think is a waste of time, all to help me be prepared for the feelings I'd have and be able to avoid those feelings. That's my perfectionism at play. I know that. But also me trying to protect me in the experience. And I realized what I was doing and how I actually have no clue what people will think or say. But in those moments, I was already making myself feel badly. And it wasn't helping me actually feel any better at all.
You know, it's funny that you mentioned in terms of coming to the radio show, because today, this is one of my first times being on here, and I was definitely thinking earlier this week, like, I need to be prepared, I need to do some research, I need to study, kind of all of those same things where it's like, what could I possibly do wrong?
Yes.
And what actions do I need to take to make sure that doesn't happen? What if I have dry mouth? What if I have a cough? You know,
walking through the potential pitfalls, and then how to get myself out of what the feel might come from that, the mistake.
Right. And like, what do I do to prepare? But in thinking about these things, when I first got the invite to join you, I was excited. And then thinking about these things, I was like, there's so many opportunities to make a mistake.
To mess up.
That adds nerves. That adds, like, it takes away from it. It's like, it's not psyching yourself up. It's psyching yourself down.
Well said, because self-criticality definitely can help us see spaces of bias, maybe gain perspective, think about areas of improvement. There is utility in it. It probably keeps us safe at periods of time, second-guessing our own behaviors and, like, maybe I shouldn't do that thing. So it isn't all necessarily rooted in that negativity, but there's big impact to us. And what would you see as the impacts, Robin?
First and foremost, feeling bad about yourself.
Feeling bad.
Right. And when you feel bad about yourself, it's really difficult to enjoy much of anything around you. Mm-hmm. And I think that, you know, like you said, there can be benefits from it. Growth, right? But how do we do that in a way that is positive and uplifting. And a lot of times in therapy, we talk about the concept of reparenting, thinking about yourself as a child. Imagine you're talking to a child. The things you're saying to yourself, would you say that to a child?
Yeah.
And chances are,
It's a very
no.
good point.
And
Yeah.
how would you tell them to change their behavior in a way that is also supportive and loving and motivating?
Right. Yeah. Well, even thinking about 75 to 80% of our time spent with ourselves is in negative content. That's, to me, the dismal impact of that is that we live with that framework then of seeing ourselves that way. And you mention a really cool strategy. If somebody said, well, how do I get out of this? What do I need to do? You kind of offer the thought of, well, what would you say to a child? And how would you reframe whatever the statement was from a space of probably gentleness, maybe kindness,
Compassion.
even. My first thought is when I've been thinking about, well, what would we do? What do we do? What did I do? Even about my own self-critical voice when I notice it, I think we immediately jump to criticizing ourselves about criticizing. So if you're sitting there, listeners, and you have this voice right now, I want to say, don't criticize you for being self-critical. I can hear all the voices right now saying, why am I so ridiculous for judging myself all the time?
Yeah, like, I saw this meme that was like, my therapist told me to be nicer to myself. And my inner voice said, yeah, you idiot. Be nicer.
Right. So first, sit with that. Like, initially, just be gentle with you that we do this. We all do it. And it is going to be innate to the human experience because it activates our fight or flight response. So I would also say, be an observer to this. Almost like noticing your self-talk. And when you notice it, start to separate those thoughts from you as a person, from you being defined as a person. So I'm going to give you an example here. Somebody might say, that was the wrong thing to type in that email. Okay, that happens a lot. That was the wrong thing to type in that email. Instead say, notice that you did that. I'm thinking that it was the wrong thing to type in that email. We are not our thoughts, everyone. We are not our thoughts, and we can start to separate our negative statements from us as people. What would you say to that, Robin?
I think that's something that we need reminders of, right? It's like, don't believe everything you think, because we have this inner dialogue. It doesn't make it the truth.
True.
Right?
Yes.
It doesn't make it accurate. It's an emotion, and we need to handle it with care, right? It's coming from a place of wanting to, all the things you covered, protect ourselves. It's coming from a place of love.
Yes.
But we don't necessarily need to stop having those critical thoughts, but let's change how we respond to them.
And maybe, and you're saying maybe change how we receive them. We receive them as thoughts and not necessarily self-statements.
Right.
And that would get to another idea I had about recognizing what we can do to respond to self-criticality. I want everybody to think about the role of would and should in your life. Think about those two words. How often do you say those words? And are they being said like, I should have blank, or I could be blank? These are inherently judgment words that work well for assessment. They work great for brainstorming, like we could fill in the blank. But think how often they limit you from honoring the current moment you're in. What would you say, Robin?
I think one of my favorite sayings I've ever heard is stop shoulding yourself.
Yes.
Because it's so common.
Yes.
You hear it. I hear it all the time, every day. I should be doing the laundry. I should go, like there are infinite shoulds.
Yep.
And yeah, it's just take a moment and focus on what you are doing.
Right, because that word is often used from a self-critical place of not only a judgment of what we are doing, it's a judgment of everything we're not doing in that moment.
Yeah.
I should be doing the laundry, as you just said, is whatever we are doing, we're already then putting a valuation on shouldn't be in that moment because we're using the word should. Mm-hmm. And then we're saying a judgment about how we ought to be spending our time too. Mm-hmm. and think of what then we're devaluing whatever we're doing.
Yeah, and we're not in that moment. So it's like, we're always looking forward or looking to the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you're, okay, and then you go do the laundry. As you're doing the laundry, I should make dinner.
Yes. All the moments that we aren't in. That leads me to that fourth thing of what we can do when we are noticing and when we're experiencing the self-criticality. Assess your feels. Really assess them, everybody. Words are words. They bring meaning. And know that they bring meaning. We attach meaning to them. Sometimes the self-criticality both covers emotion and can lead to it. So what feelings are present for you under the self-criticality? I mentioned a story about, is it shame? It was for me in the driving. Is it fear? And let those emotions have space. Sometimes if we are using self-criticality to protect, we have a feel about something. Do you have a thought about that, Robin?
Yeah, this makes me think even more just about talking to a child, right? It's like if they come to you with fear or shame, or they spilled milk on the floor and they say, I should have picked my milk up, and they're crying.
Mm-hmm.
How do you help them feel okay about that and let them know that it is okay?
Mm-hmm.
And, honor the feeling, right? Mm-hmm. And meet that need rather than staying focused on the what did happen. It's like, what's the need here?
Well said. It's that that actually just leads to the last thing that I would say that we could use when we notice or are responding to self-criticality. Follow it up. When you've noticed it, follow it up with a kind statement. You have huge ability. We all have huge ability to reinforce ourselves. And I hear this phrase frequently when we kind of started this with how mean we are to us. But what if we were the friend to ourselves that we are to other people? That I think very frequently we maybe don't want to highlight that inner critic because we don't want people to know how mean we are. And so what if we weren't? What if we followed self-criticality and the noticing of where it was with some kind of statement that was kind or gentle to us, that was reinforcing of us? What would change in your daily routine, Robin, if you did that?
Honestly, I think it would be energizing. I would have more energy, right? When you have those critical thoughts, notice how you feel afterwards. It doesn't make you want to do the thing you are saying you should. It doesn't. Mm-hmm. It doesn't motivate you. It doesn't. It doesn't feel good.
Mm-hmm. We think it does. We use it even as a strategy, as we mentioned.
Yeah, we trick ourselves.
Yep. That really it is this concept of self-compassion is the healer to self-criticality. Self-compassion is the healer to self-criticality. And what does that mean to you?
Well, it makes me think of, and I've been thinking about this a bit too lately, is the phrase or the golden rule that we talk about of treat others the way you want to be treated. I thought about that the other day, and I was thinking that is a great message, and it tells us to treat others with kindness. But why don't we apply it to ourselves? And so then I thought, treat yourself the way you want to be treated.
Yeah.
The way you want to be treated.
Yeah. And often it is the way that we treat other people. I was just somewhere this week where somebody said that exact thing to me of very much valuing as a core belief. They said it was a core belief that treating other people the way that we would want to be treated is something they aim to live by every single day. I think that's pretty common.
Yeah.
And we call it literally the golden rule.
Right.
And are we doing that with us, though?
Right, because that's what, we've talked about self-sacrifice and things like that. That's what leads to that is it's great when we, treat other people with that kindness, but reflect on what is getting in the way of treating yourself with that same kindness, and why don't you deserve it just as much?
Speechless. Speechless. So much to think about here. We are headed to a commercial break, but when we come back, we will talk through listener questions on that self-critical voice that we all experience, as we've been saying in this segment. Feels Out Loud will come right back and process through your thoughts in just a moment.
From nobody else.
We are back again with Feels Out Loud, and this part of the show is where we talk through listener questions from you all. If you have a question related to mental wellness, sharing feelings, or topics for each week that you would like us to process through, please visit our website at becomingtogethermn.com and find the Feels Out Loud page to submit a question directly. Or you can email us at contact@becomingtogethermn.com. We want to hear from you, and we want to know what you are wondering about. I want to give a thank you to the several listeners who sent in questions this week about the challenging topic of being self-critical. Robin, we have a listener who says the following, and I really appreciate their self-reflection here. They say, I just can't get out of my head. After something happens, I keep going over it again and again and second-guessing the choices I made. But then I get mad at myself that I can't just let it go. So, what do I do?
I feel like this question, did I write this question?
Maybe you did. Maybe you did.
I feel you and I hear you on that. It is a challenge. And something funny about this question is you can almost recognize the frustration towards yourself.
Yes.
Within the question.
Yes.
And I would say this sounds counterproductive, but let it be. Like you know, that's what happens. You're going over it. You're second guessing.
Mm-hmm.
And like we've talked about, that's serving a purpose. Maybe stop and think, okay, what purpose is this serving?
Mm-hmm.
Likely anxiety, worry about making a mistake.
Sure.
And then what do you need in that moment? And you probably need reassurance.
I would say the same thing. I would just piggyback off of that of in the moment, notice that you did it. Notice that it's happening. Try changing the channel. So when you find yourself thinking and then thinking about your thinking, do not think harder, listener. And don't try to make meaning from it. In that moment, do something to focus on an entirely different topic. And then don't write anything about the fact that you've been thinking about thinking about thinking. Turn on music, move your body right where you are, something that gets you to change the channel in your brain and focus on a different topic. And that comes to I was going to say, for the second thing, be nice to yourself. And this is actually what listener number 2 says to us. Being nice to myself feels completely strange. Where can I start?
Well, sometimes things feel strange and you got to do them anyway. It's going to feel strange if it's new. Honestly, it is sad that being nice to ourselves does feel so foreign because that just shows how much of a practice we are in if not doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say to this listener, first, tune into the words that you're saying already. Just what you're already saying out loud. We don't have to often make up new things because my guess is you are already saying what you need to hear. I would guess that you are saying hello with a kind tone to other people. So use that same kind tone to say something to you. Just notice the ways you're kind to others, and you'll get data on what already is genuine data for you. And this happens to us all the time as therapists. When we're in a room, we frequently just need to notice our own words in what we need to do. What would you say, Robin?
Oh, the number of times where I've been saying something to a client thinking, this is what I need to do. Mm-hmm. It's so much like you can be talking to someone else and talking to yourself at the same time. Because for some reason, and going back to the treat others the way you want to be treated, it's easier for us to do that for other people at times. And so just like to holding up a mirror almost and letting it bounce back to you as well.
Right. Well, and to that mirror point, maybe it is literally writing a message on your mirror.
Yeah.
It sounds corny, but write a message where only you would see it. And then a short message that you'd see over and over and over again. That is a way to start to practice being kind. Doing something repetitive that it could be literally in the mirror.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. We're at the end of our show already for today. Thank you for listening this morning, everyone. Join us next week as we talk about emotions and social media in the age of digital well-being. And in the week ahead, be kind to yourself, everyone. Remember that connections fosters wellness, and your voice is absolutely one that the world around you needs to hear. Share yourselves, friends.
Some will, some won't. I wanna feel